Agent Martz, looking at 1274, those are 5 microliter blood drops that you put on some sort of substrate, 2 different substrates, correct?
That's correct.
What was the substrate on the top ones?
I believe it was a towel.
And this was what you used to determine what a 5 microliter blood drop, or 5 microliters of blood would look like?
Yes.
Is that towel anything similar at all to swatches that you got with evidence?
In what respect?
In any respect.
Well, I don't know because I didn't do the test.
So you have no idea what 5 microliters of blood would look like on a swatch from LAPD, do you?
No.
And you are using quantities of blood in this experiment from the evidence that were relatively close to the minimum detectable amounts that you had determined for your negative ion test, correct?
For the negative ion, I was above the minimum detectable amount.
You were close, weren't you?
Oh, I don't believe I was that close.
Stain Q207 from the sock. You remember that one?
Yeah.
That was taken from the middle part of the stain rather than the edge?
The 207, I don't know, as I told you, I don't know where it came from. You showed me a picture. I don't know where it came from.
Did you ever ask?
I've asked many a times, and I don't think I've gotten a satisfactory answer.
Is there more blood on Q207 than Q206?
Are you talking the total amount that's on 206 versus 207?
Yeah.
Or where I cut?
No, you're cutting. You're Q206 cutting.
I tried to take the same amount of cuttings from both. I tried to get the same amount of blood.
You didn't do a cutting on Q207, did you?
Yes.
On Q207?
Yeah, the first day, the charts are labeled 206, 207.
Right. And did you have a lot of Q207 left over?
It's all relevant. Relative. I didn't use as much as was present. There's more present now than there was, or there's less present now than there was when I started.
So you didn't use all of Q207 to try and get as much blood as possible so that you could have higher amounts of blood to look for EDTA, did you?
As I mentioned earlier, in all the cases...
Move to strike, non-responsive.
Sustained. Re-ask the question.
You did not use all of Q207, which had much more blood than the cutting you took, correct?
I don't agree with that.
How much did you cut out of Q207?
In all cases, I took larger than the minimum amount that was needed, and I combined 206 and 207.
And you had determined the minimum amount you needed from your calculations of sizes of blood drops and what size square swatch you would need to have minimum amounts of blood, correct?
Yes.
Did you suspect when you saw the 160 ion in the back gate and the sock that there might be EDTA there?
Yeah. Yes.
You could have used more blood than you used in that experiment to try and find the 132 daughter ion, couldn't you?
I didn't believe that it was relevant.
You could have used more blood, couldn't you, if you wanted to use a larger quantity of blood to try and find whether there was a true EDTA spectrum there, couldn't you?
To me, it was irrelevant, and I didn't want to consume all the evidence in case the defense wanted to use it.
You said you called the prosecution to see if you could get some more, didn't you?
Right.
That was for their test, right?
Yes. And I wanted to save some for the defense.
Did they ever tell you that you had a limitation on what you could use?
No, but I generally will never consume all the evidence.
Did you ever ask for some more so that you could run a larger quantity of blood to really determine whether there's EDTA there or not?
I didn't feel it was relevant.
Is the answer to that no? You didn't?
I didn't. What's the question?
You didn't make any effort to try and run more blood than you had run in your first set of tests to try and actually identify EDTA in the back gate and the sock, did you?
Well, I did, and that's why I went to the positive ion mode the next day, because I felt that EDTA may be present in blood.
Move to strike, non-responsive. Quantity, Agent Martz. Did you ever try to test more blood that you had available to you when you suspected there was EDTA on the gate and the sock?
I felt there was a better way, and that was to do the positive ion, and that's the way I looked for the EDTA. It was 10 times more sensitive.
Did you ever consider using more blood?
No,
Overruled.
I always try to save evidence in case the defense wants to examine it.
You had the sock at one point, didn't you?
Yes.
How large a cutting did you take compared to what was left on the sock?
I probably took no more than one-tenth would be just an estimate.
You had plenty of more sample on the sock, didn't you?
Yeah.
You weren't concerned with using up what you had available on the sock, were you?
I didn't know what other testing needed to be done. If DNA testing needed to be done, there would be more blood needed. Now, if it was just for EDTA, it'd be another question. There's more things that can be done with a blood stain than EDTA.
Did you ever ask, can I take another cutting because maybe I better use a little bit more blood since we're pretty close to minimum detectable limits?
No, because you weren't concerned with that because minimum detectable limit had nothing to do with whether or not it was preserved or non-preserved blood. In preserved blood, there was so much present, it didn't make any difference.
If you test around minimum detectable limits, you're going to find less, aren't you, if it's there? A lot less, aren't you?
Well, I don't know about a lot less. Every instrument has a minimum detectable limit. And you either have it or you don't have it. In the sock and the gate, I didn't have it.
Did you ever consider trying to test your suspicion that you found EDTA by testing a larger quantity of blood?
Objection, Ashton answered.
Overruled.
In this case?
Yes.
No.
No further questions.
Ms. Clark.
Mr. Martz, why would it not be relevant to use more blood to determine whether or not you had EDTA from preserved blood?
As I mentioned earlier, it was actually a very easy analysis. It may seem complicated, but it was actually very easy. The stains were taken from approximately the same amount. I always made sure that I took more stain from the question sample than I did the known. And as you saw from my charts, it's very easy to differentiate between blood that's preserved with EDTA and blood that's not preserved.
And by taking more stain from the evidence, would you encourage higher readings from the evidence than you would ordinarily if you just took even amounts from the evidence and the reference sample?
That's correct.
And in that way, you overcompensate for any variation in size by making sure that the evidence reading is going to be overrepresented.
That was my theory, and that's why I did that, yes.
So if anything, the readings that you got in the evidence graphs and chart results that you have overrepresent the amount of EDTA.
That's correct.
Now, you talked about detection limits, sir.
Your Honor.
We lost our operator,
Well, try it the old-fashioned way.
What's that? I forgot.
No, use the phone.
That's a little better.
You may. Proceed.
Thank you. I'll go to something else for a moment. So you talked about detection limit. Let me ask you this. Whatever size of blood stain you take, be it 5 microliters, 10 microliters, whatever. Assume it's 5 microliters. That's very small, isn't it?
Right.
When you test 5 microliters of blood, if it is 5 microliters of blood that comes from a tube containing EDTA preserved blood, will you detect EDTA?
Yes. It's very easy to detect EDTA in a stain. With a positive ion mode, it would even be 1/10 the size of a 1 millimeter square, so it would be extremely small size.
And if you run that same sample size, as small as it can be, and it is unpreserved blood, will you detect EDTA?
In unpreserved blood,
Right.
I've not been able to identify EDTA from blood stains that size.
Then what does that tell you about the detectable limit? If your signal is so weak, sir, that it is below the detectable limit in your blood stain, does that tell you that EDTA has not been identified?
That's correct.
In that respect, sir, is it irrelevant whether or not you use more blood or less blood?
As long as I use the same size stains, it's irrelevant.
Because even if you use very little blood, EDTA will produce a strong signal if it is present.
That's correct.
And by that I mean EDTA preserved blood.
Yes.
Now, Mr. Blazier asked you whether or not you've ever called defense attorneys to advise them of what you tell the prosecutors about when you work on cases for prosecutorial agencies. You recall that?
Yes.
Have you ever refused to speak to a defense attorney who had questions of you?
No. No.
Have you ever refused to speak to Mr. Blazier when he had questions of you, sir?
No.
And has he had questions of you, sir, throughout these proceedings?
Yes, he has.
And have you answered them?
Yes, I have.
In fact, have you approached him to ask him if he had any questions?
Yes.
And did he have some?
On several occasions, yes.
Did you answer them?
Yes.
You indicated, sir, that you were confused by the fact that he wanted to call you as a witness.
Yes.
Why is that?
Because my
Overruled.
results clearly show that EDTA is not present in the bloodstains in question.
Now, sir, as to all of the evidence testing, now with that in mind, I mean the evidence of the blood on the gate, the blood on the sock, did you write reports containing your conclusions and your results and the testing procedures you followed to be provided to the prosecution and the defense?
Yes.
And when did you provide those reports?
It was probably the end of February, the beginning of March. I don't have the exact date.
Okay. And those reports indicated your conclusion that no EDTA from preserved blood was present in the evidence.
That's correct.
And having provided them by the end of March, sir, if you wanted to prove that EDTA blood, preserved blood, was present on the evidence stains, what tests would you conduct?
Well, I would conduct the test that I performed here.
To your knowledge, has the defense conducted such tests?
I have no knowledge of them conducting those tests, no.
If you wanted to prove that EDTA preserved blood, when you have EDTA preserved blood, that the EDTA will break down or degrade when subjected to sunlight, high-intensity light, rust, fertilizer, or metal, or environmental conditions, would you conduct experiments under those conditions to prove that hypothesis?
Yes.
To your knowledge, has that ever been done by any defense expert?
Not to my knowledge.
In your opinion, sir, between the beginning of March when you turned over your results and now, would there have been ample time to conduct those experiments?
I believe there would have been, yes.
Would there have been ample time, sir, to conduct any tests
Objection.
on the evidence?
May we approach?
Yes, with the court reporter, please. Thank you, counsel. Proceed.
Sir, had a scientist with the equipment of the liquid chromatograph tandem mass spectrometer, if such a person had that equipment, could they, between the beginning of March when you provided your results to the defense and now, have conducted tests on the socks and on the gate to determine the presence of EDTA preserved blood?
Yes, they could.
And in that space of time, sir, could they also have conducted tests involving the use of an internal standard, like the one pointed out to you by counsel from Cambridge, to quantify the amount of blood being tested in the evidence as well as the reference samples?
They could have quantitated the amount of EDTA. To quantitate the blood, they would have to use a different procedure.
But they could have adopted a procedure to quantitate the blood,
Yes,
and they could have then tested that blood,
yes,
and they could have then quantitated the EDTA present in the evidence and in the reference blood.
yes, they could have.
This is a Defense 1274, sir. Can you tell us what was the point of this?
Well, when I made the 5 microliter blood sample, I was able to cut it in pieces and determine my minimum detectable amount of blood stain.
And what were you attempting to show here?
Well, I needed a certain amount of blood in order to determine the minimum detectable amount. So I placed a known amount of blood and took a portion of that and tested it.
Okay, and were you trying to visualize what that amount of blood would look like?
No,
That was just blood stains showing that was the amount that you were testing,
yes, that's
not
correct.
what it would look like.
No.
All right, you were shown. I'm going to show you what it's. You were shown People's 544E. And Your Honor, I've informally labeled these. I'm going to ask leave of the court to label them with handwriting or typing that's better than mine. Okay, these show the graphs of the evidence blood stain on the gate.
Yes,
And in this chart, you indicated that the 160 was not shown in the full daughter spectrum.
that's correct.
Although you indicated detected it, you thought, in the scan where you were only looking at the daughter 160 on the gate evidence, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
What does this signify to you, that when you ran the full daughter spectrum to try and achieve 293, 160, and 132 at the same time, you could not do so?
It indicated to me that I could not identify EDTA because I needed those ions to identify EDTA.
And you hypothesized with Mr. Blazier that the 160 was below your detectable limit?
That's correct.
Well, if it's below your detectable limit, sir, then can it be EDTA from preserved blood?
No, it cannot.
And is that because the signal given, no matter how small the amount of blood, the signal given for EDTA preserved blood is so strong that you should get the full daughter spectrum whenever you run it?
That's correct.
And so you did not?
And I did not in this case.
You were shown this chart, sir, by Mr. Blazier.
Yes, I was.
Does that chart reflect any testing that you ever conducted?
No, it does not.
Does that chart reflect any result that you ever obtained in any test?
No, it does not.
Does that chart have anything to do with the work that you have done and actually obtained the results in this case?
No, it does not.
Does that chart reflect the results of the testing of any of the evidence in this case,
No, it does not.
or any of the reference samples in this case?
No, it does not.
Is that an accurate depiction of your testimony as it relates to the comparison between the amount of EDTA found in preserved blood versus the amount of whatever substance that is in the evidence stains?
Could you repeat that, please?
No?
I didn't think you could.
I'm not even going to try and read it. Does this chart, sir, reflect accurately reflect your testimony concerning the discrepancy, the dramatic difference between the EDTA signal you got from the reference samples, that means blood from preserved EDTA tubes, and the evidence stains in this case?
This chart does not reflect any of the testing that I did whatsoever.
Does it accurately reflect any of your testimony, in your opinion, concerning the dramatic difference between the signals you got in the reference samples and the evidence stains?
No, it does not.
All right, Ms. Clark, you've been referring to,
That was Defense 1270. Thank you. Now, you recall being shown a square from the sock. There was a chart done by the defense. Sir, you remember this diagram?
Yes, I do.
It indicates that 207 was taken from the lower right-hand corner as you face this diagram.
Yes.
Do you have any idea whether that is true or not?
No, I don't know where 207 came from.
When you received 207, was it a cutting in a tube?
Yes, it was.
And then you took a cutting from that?
Yes,
Now, you indicated that you in fact did test 207 and 206 on the first day.
that's correct.
Did you take a cutting from the small cutting you found in the tube marked 207?
Yes,
And the cutting 206 is the one you made from the sock itself?
that's correct.
You do not know then whether 207 actually came from the area right next to 206.
No, to my understanding, it just came from somewhere in that blue area, or blue-green area.
Now, when you did the combined testing of 206 and 207, was that in the negative ion mode?
Yes, it was.
And your result was?
No EDTA was identified in that particular stain, and that stain did not come from preserved blood.
Now, sir, you indicated... I'm going to show you the two charts that have been previously marked as people's 543 and 544F, respectively. These are labeled, this is the gate with EDTA blood applied. This is where you put known EDTA blood on the gate swatch. If the blood recovered from the gate, the evidence blood in this case, were actually blood from the tube with preservative EDTA in it, is this the signal you would expect to get?
Yes, it is.
And when you tested the actual blood recovered from the gate, the evidence blood, is that the signal you got?
No, I did not.
And look at the chart now up.
That's
And
the
that-
signal I got, yes.
And that is the signal you got that's on people's 544E.
Yes, that's correct.
And if the blood on the sock had in fact been blood from an EDTA preserved tube, would you have expected to get the signal shown in people's 543F?
Yes, I would have.
And is that the result that you got?
No, it is not.
Showing you people's 543E. This is your graphs of the evidence blood tested for EDTA on the sock. This is the actual evidence. Is that the result that you got?
Yes, it is.
And in each case, with respect to the blood recovered from the sock and the blood recovered from the gate, did your test results consistently show from May 19th through May 22nd or 23rd,
28th.
28th, that there was no EDTA preserved blood in the stain on the gate and the stain on the sock?
In all the tests that I performed, no EDTA was identified in the stain from the gate or the stain from the sock. Those stains did not come from EDTA preserved blood.
Do you have any doubt about that, sir?
I have no doubt whatsoever.
I have nothing further.
Agent Martz, would you agree that your ability to quantify any of these amounts relies upon your ability to accurately calculate or estimate or look at and determine how much evidence you started with?
Not to distinguish between preserved and non-preserved blood, I don't agree with that, no.
You don't think the amount of evidence that you started with when you tested has anything to do with your ability to detect EDTA?
I don't believe, with the precautions I took, that it would have any effect whatsoever.
Would you allow us how an expert with a great deal more experience than you might differ with your opinion?
What was the question?
Will you allow us how an expert with a great deal more experience with you might differ from your opinion?
Experience in what?
EDTA, mass spec, degrees in chemistry, toxicology, pharmacology?
I don't think anyone probably in the world has more experience with identifying EDTA in forensic samples than I do.
No further questions.
All right, let me see counsel without the court reporter, please. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our recess for the evening at this time. Please remember all of my admonitions to you. Don't discuss the case amongst yourselves. Don't form any opinions about the case. Don't conduct any deliberations till the matter has been submitted to you. Don't allow anybody to communicate with you with regard to the case. As far as the jury is concerned, we'll stay in recess until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. All right, Agent Martz, you may